What would you do if a homeowner association tried to take away your house because you parked more than one car on your private property? This homeowner decided to stand up against the HOA bullies. Here is what happened. And the title HOA story starts like this. I never planned to own most of a neighborhood, it just sort of happened over time. About 15 years ago, I was looking to invest in real estate after getting a decent inheritance from my grandfather. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention this story is actually from r/legal advice. Don't worry though, the story is really interesting and satisfying. So the housing market had taken a hit and I found this nice suburban development called HOA Neighborhood, and by the way, I decided to not show the real name out of fear of getting doxxed potentially, with reasonable prices. The neighborhood was well maintained with good schools nearby, making it attractive for families. It had about 70 homes, a small community pool, and even a playground area. I bought my first property there, the house I still live in, and quickly realized the potential. The HOA fees were reasonable at the time, around $150 per month, covering common area maintenance and the community pool. The bylaws were not overly restrictive and the board seemed to exist mainly to prevent the neighborhood from falling into disrepair. After living there for about a year, I noticed a foreclosure 2 streets over. The price was too good to pass up, so I formed an LLC and purchased it as a rental property. The tenants I found were a young professional couple who kept the place in excellent condition. The rental income more than covered the mortgage, HOA fees and maintenance with a decent profit margin. The success led me to purchase another property in the same neighborhood the following year and then 2 more the year after that. Each time I created a new LLC or holding company to manage the investment. It was not about hiding my ownership, it was simply good business practice for liability protection and tax purposes. My CPA had recommended this structure and I followed his advice. Fast forward 15 years and I have accumulated ownership of about 65% of the neighborhood. Some of them were foreclosures, others came from elderly residents looking to downsize, and a few were from families relocating for work. I always paid fair market value and maintained the properties well. Most residents had no idea about my extensive ownership, they just knew me as the quiet guy who lived at the corner of Maple and Pine who occasionally fixed up old cars. Speaking of cars, that is where my troubles began. I've always been a bit of a car enthusiast. I got my daily driver, a sensible Subaru that gets me to my office job, and then there's my restoration project, a 1967 Mustang that I've been slowly bringing back to life over the past 2 years. I kept it under a fitted cover when not working on it, and my third vehicle is a Ford F-150 that I use for hauling materials for my properties and occasionally helping friends move. All 3 vehicles fit comfortably in my extended driveway without blocking the sidewalk or looking cluttered. The HOA had gone through several board iterations over the years, mostly reasonable people who understood that maintaining property values meant finding a balance between regulations and resident happiness. That all changed when Karen moved in about 8 months ago. Karen bought one of the few properties I did not own, a 2-story colonial across from the community playground. Within weeks, she had wormed her way onto the HOA board, filling a vacancy left when another member relocated. Within 3 months, she had somehow maneuvered herself into the presidency. The changes were subtle at first: stricter enforcement of existing rules, more frequent violation notices for minor infractions like trash cans being visible from the street for too long. But then came the beautification initiatives that seemed primarily focused on making her section of the neighborhood look better at everyone else's expense. Last month, I received a notice in my mailbox that caught me completely off guard. It said, "Violation notice, excessive vehicle accumulation." Per newly adopted HOA regulation, properties are limited to 2 visible vehicles per household. You are currently in violation with 3 vehicles. A special assessment fee of $150 per additional vehicle will be added to your monthly HOA dues effective immediately. I was baffled. This was the first that I'd ever heard of any such regulation. I checked my email and found nothing about a policy change or a meeting to even discuss new rules. When I talked to my neighbor, he was equally surprised but mentioned that he had heard something about a so-called special session of the board that hardly anyone attended. I immediately called the HOA management company and the representative confirmed the new policy but could not tell me when or how it had been approved. She simply directed me to Karen for further questions. Trying to be reasonable, I sent Karen an email explaining my situation and asking about the process for this policy change. Her response was curt: the board has determined that excessive vehicles detract from our neighborhood aesthetic and lower property values. The special session where this was approved was announced via a notice at the community bulletin board by the pool. If you had concerns, you should have attended. The assessment stands, and I knew this was not right. I've been in this neighborhood long enough to know that policy changes require proper notice and a vote of property owners, not just the board. The community bulletin board was hardly an appropriate place for official notes, especially during winter when the pool was closed. At the next regular HOA meeting, I showed up ready to discuss the issue calmly. About 20 residents attended, including several of my tenants, though they did not know that I was their landlord. Karen ran the meeting with an iron fist, limiting comments to 60 seconds and dismissing concerns with practice condescension. When my turn came to speak, I explained that my vehicles were well maintained, not eyesores, and that I had not received proper notice about the policy change. A classic car is a restoration project that I work on as a hobby. It is always under a fitted cover when not being actively worked on. My truck is necessary for my side business and property maintenance. None of them are junkers or eyesores. Karen cut me off before I could finish. The rule is not about the condition of the vehicles, it is about quantity. Studies show that neighborhoods with strict parking regulations maintain higher property values. Thus, the board has determined that 2 vehicles per household is the appropriate limit. Well, I would like to see these studies, I replied. And I would like to see the bylaw provisions that allowed such a significant policy change without a proper vote of all homeowners. Her face tightened. The bylaws give the board discretion to implement rules for the betterment of the community. If you would like to dispute this, you're welcome to hire an attorney, but I assure you, the board acted within its authority. Another homeowner spoke up, asking similar questions about the notification process. Karen dismissed him as well, stating that proper notice was provided according to the HOA guidelines. After the meeting, I approached Karen privately, trying to find a compromise. Look, I understand wanting to keep the neighborhood looking nice. What if I park my classic car in the garage when I'm not working on it? Rules are rules, she said with a smirk. We cannot make exceptions or everyone will want one. The assessment stands. If you don't like it, you can just move. Well, the following week I received an updated statement showing my HOA dues had increased from $200 to $350 per month. I decided to pay just a regular $200, hoping to resolve the issue before it escalated, and that was a mistake. 2 weeks later, I received a formal notice threatening a lien on my property if I did not pay the so-called delinquent assessment plus a $50 late fee. Around the same time, I started getting calls from my property manager about violation notices at several of my rental properties, things like grass half an inch too tall, a garden hose visible from the street, a trash can brought in at 7:30 p.m. instead of 7 p.m., etc. It was clear that Karen had somehow figured out I owned multiple properties and was targeting me specifically. What she didn't know was exactly how many properties I owned. I decided it was time to do some research. I carefully reviewed the HOA bylaws, which I had filed away years ago, as I suspected policy changes and special assessments required: number 1, written notice to all homeowners at least 30 days prior to any vote, number 2, a 2/3 majority vote of all property owners, not just the board members, and number 3, proper documentation of the vote and notification to all homeowners of the results. None of these steps had been followed. The special session Karen referenced had been attended by only the 5 board members and 3 of their friends, based on what I could gather from talking to other neighbors. I also discovered something else interesting in the financial reports I requested from the management company. Landscaping expenses had tripled in the past 6 months, with the majority of the work being done on the common area directly adjacent to Karen's property, as well as those of 2 other board members. There was also a new line item for community planning consultant fees paid to someone with the same last name as Karen. Something was not right here and it was time to take action. But I want to make sure I'm on solid legal ground before making my next move. So Reddit, here's where I need advice. I own about 65% of the properties in my neighborhood through various LLCs and holding companies. The HOA board, led by a power-hungry president, has implemented an invalid fee against me for having 3 vehicles instead of their newly declared limit of 2. They are also targeting my rental properties with petty violation, and I've I've discovered some suspicious financial activities that look like board members enriching themselves with HOA funds. So what are my legal options here? Can I use my majority ownership to remove the HOA board? Should I get a lawyer involved immediately or try to resolve this through HOA channels first? Is there any risk to revealing that I own most of the neighborhood? And what is the best way to address the potentially fraudulent financial activities that I've discovered? Thanks in advance for any advice. I want to end this nonsense, but I want to do it legally and effectively. And yeah guys, let me know in the comments what you would do in this situation. Would you try to go nuclear and dissolve the HOA, or would you try to reason with them first? But then again, reasoning with a bunch of HOA Karens seems absolutely impossible if you ask me. Either way, if you have enjoyed the story so far, please don't forget to like the video. And now let's dive into the first comment written on Reddit. It said, "Dude, you're sitting on a nuclear option here. With 65% ownership, you basically control the entire HOA. Check your state laws and HOA bylaws, but in most cases you can just call for a special meeting yourself and vote these clowns out in one fell swoop. Document everything first, take photos of the financial records showing those suspicious payments, save the emails and get written statements from neighbors about the lack of proper notification. Then drop the bomb and call for a special meeting with removal of current board as the agenda. They will freak out when they realize you own most of the neighborhood through your LLCs. Just make sure your LLCs are all properly registered and in good standing before you make your move. Comment number 2, you need to consult with a real estate attorney who specializes in HOA disputes ASAP. Don't try to handle this yourself. The fact that they are threatening liens on your properties makes this time sensitive. With your ownership percentage, you have significant leverage, but how you use it matters legally. An attorney can help you navigate this properly. Also, request a complete audit of HOA finances going back at least 3 years. The consultant fees to Karen's family member could be a serious breach of fiduciary duty. Document all instances of selective enforcement against your properties. Your state laws regarding HOAs will determine exactly what actions you can take, but with proper legal guidance you could potentially reorganize this. So after receiving some solid advice here, I decided to move forward with a plan. I spent the next week meeting with my attorney and preparing a comprehensive strategy. We reviewed state laws governing HOAs, as well as my property ownership structures and the documented bylaw violations by the current board. "You are in a uniquely powerful position," my attorney told me, "but we need to be methodical about this to avoid any potential backlash or legal complications." So then, we drafted formal letters requesting all HOA documents, meaning meeting minutes, financial records for the past 3 years, voting records, and official communications regarding policy changes. These requests were sent from my attorney's office on behalf of each of my LLCs separately, creating a sudden flood of legal document requests that the HOA management company could not ignore. Karen called me the next day, clearly agitated. "What is with all these document requests from different property owners? Do you know anything about this?" I kept my tone neutral. "Well, I'm aware that several homeowners have concerns about recent policy changes and financial management. I've heard people talking at the mailboxes." "Well, it is causing a lot of unnecessary work," she snapped. "The board conducts its business properly, and these fishing expeditions are wasting everyone's time and HOA resources." "Well, I'm sure the management company is just following legal requirements for document access," I replied calmly. "Every homeowner has the right to review HOA records." 2 days later, I received another violation notice for so-called unauthorized gatherings because I had spoken with 3 neighbors in my driveway about this HOA issues. The $100 fine attached to it was the last straw for me. My attorney advised me it was time to execute our plan, so therefore we prepared notices for a special meeting of homeowners to be held in 2 weeks with an agenda that included review of recent policy changes and compliance with bylaw requirements, as well as audit of HOA financial activities, and a vote on continuation of current board leadership. We sent these notices via certified mail to every homeowner in the neighborhood, strictly following the notification requirements in the bylaws. Karen attempted to block the meeting, sending out a competing notice claiming that only the board could call special meetings in. My attorney quickly responded with a formal letter citing the specific bylaw provision that allowed owners representing at least 25% of the properties to call in such a meeting, a threshold I easily exceeded alone. This day before the meeting, I received an interesting call from the HOA management company. It said, "We have received concerning information regarding the special meeting tomorrow," the account manager said hesitantly. "The board president has instructed us to inform all homeowners that the meeting has been cancelled due to procedural violations." The HOA probably means procedurally generated random violations. Anyway, what procedural violations, I asked. She did not specify exactly, but she was quite insistent. However, she paused. As a management company, we are obligated to follow the HOA bylaws, and your meeting notice appears to comply with all requirements. We are in an awkward position here. I understand, I replied. I suggest you review section 5.3 of the bylaws regarding special meetings called by homeowners. The meeting will proceed as scheduled. Your company might want to have a representative present, by the way, to observe for proper record keeping. That evening, Karen and 2 other board members went door to door, telling homeowners the meeting was cancelled. Fortunately, most people had already received my clarification email confirming the meeting would proceed as planned. I rented a meeting room at the local community center to accommodate everyone comfortably. My attorney would be present, along with a court reporter, to create an official record of the proceedings. I had prepared detailed documentation of all bylaw violations, financial discrepancies, and instances of selective enforcement. The morning of the meeting, I arrived early to set everything up. My attorney had advised me to remain calm and factual throughout, regardless of any provocations. This is not about revenge, he reminded me. It is about proper governance and protecting your investments. By 10 a.m., the room was nearly full. About 40 homeowners had shown up, an unprecedented turnout for an HOA meeting in our neighborhood. Karen and the other board members huddled near the front, whispering among themselves and occasionally glaring in my direction. At exactly 10, I called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming today. As specified in the notice, this special meeting has been called in accordance with section 5.3 of our HOA bylaws to address concerns regarding recent policy changes, as well as financial management and board governance. Karen immediately stood up and said, "This meeting is unauthorized. Only the board can." My attorney politely interrupted her. "Miss Karen, the meeting has been properly called under section 5.3, which states that homeowners representing at least 25% of properties may call a special meeting with proper notice which was provided. This meeting is proceeding in accordance with the bylaws." Karen's face reddened. "And who are you?" "I'm counsel for several property owners in the community," he replied simply. I then continued with the agenda, first addressing the vehicle policy that had started this whole conflict. The first item concerns the recently implemented policy limiting properties to 2 vehicles and imposing a $150 monthly fee for each additional vehicle. According to our bylaws, such a policy change requires 30 days written notice to all homeowners and a 2/3 majority vote of all property owners, not just board members. I displayed the relevant bylaw section on a screen and then continued. Records show that no such notice was provided to all homeowners and no community-wide vote was conducted. Therefore, this policy was implemented in violation of our bylaws and is invalid. Karen jumped up again. "The notice was posted on the community bulletin board, which is an acceptable form of communication under the bylaws." "Actually," I replied, "Section 8.2 specifically states that notices of policy changes must be delivered via mail or email to each owner's address of record." A bulletin board posting might be sufficient for announcing a community picnic, but not for significant policy changes affecting homeowner finances. I then moved on to the financial discrepancies, presenting spreadsheets showing the dramatic increase in landscaping expenses concentrated around certain board members' properties and the consulting fees paid to Karen's brother-in-law. These financial records raise serious concerns about proper use of HOA funds, I explained. The consulting fees alone total over $15,000 in the past 6 months with no clear deliverables provided to the community. One of Karen's allies on the board, the treasurer, tried to defend these expenses. "The landscaping improvements were part of our beautification initiative, and the consulting services were for a comprehensive neighborhood development plan." "Well, can you provide copies of this development plan?" I asked, but he shifted uncomfortably. "It is still in progress." A homeowner I did not know well stood up. "I've lived here for 8 years and I've never seen the HOA act like this before. These fees and fines are getting out of control. My neighbor got a $75 fine because her kid's bike was visible in the front yard for a few hours." Several others nodded and murmured in agreement. Another resident spoke up and said, "I got fined because my trash can was brought in at 7:15 instead of 7 a.m. When I pointed out that the board member next door still had their can out at 8:30, I was told that they had a special exception because of their work schedule. Well, these testimonials continued for about 20 minutes, revealing a pattern of selective enforcement and arbitrary rule changes that had created widespread dissatisfaction. Karen tried repeatedly to adjourn the meeting, but each time my attorney politely pointed out that under the bylaws, only a majority vote of attending homeowners could adjourn a properly called special meeting. Well, then finally we reached a critical moment. Based on the documented violation of our bylaws and the financial concerns presented, I move for a vote of no confidence in the current board and the removal of all sitting board members effective immediately, I stated. Karen laughed dismissively. You need a 2/3 majority of all homeowners for that, which you will never get. Most people are not even here today. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. Well, actually, I'm prepared to vote on behalf of the properties that I represent. I replied calmly. You only have one vote. Karen snapped. My attorney handed me a folder and I removed a document listing all of my properties by address. Under our bylaws, each property gets one vote. And well, I own or control 46 properties in this neighborhood through various LLCs and holding companies, representing approximately 65% of the neighborhood. The room fell silent as I placed the document on the table. Karen's face went from red to white in seconds. That is not possible, she stammered. It is not only possible, but factual, my attorney replied, sliding forward a stack of property records and LLC documentation. Each of these business entities is a legitimate property owner, and each has assigned my client their proxy for today's vote. One of Karen's allies examined the documents, his expression growing increasingly concerned. These look legitimate, he muttered to Karen. So, to proceed with the vote, I continued calmly, I vote 46 properties in favor of removing the current HOA board. Would anyone else like to cast their vote? Nearly every homeowner present raised their hand in support. Only Karen and her 4 fellow board members voted against the motion. And so the motion passes with approximately 82% of all properties voting in favor, well exceeding the 2/3 requirement, I announced. According to our bylaws, upon removal of the board, an interim board must be appointed until a proper election can be held within 60 days. Karen was fuming. This is ridiculous. You cannot just take over like this. It is completely legal, my attorney finished for her. And necessary given the documented violations of fiduciary duty, by the way. The meeting continued with the appointment of an interim board consisting of myself and 4 other homeowners who had expressed interest in serving on the board. We immediately passed resolutions rescinding all improperly implemented policies, including the vehicle limitation, and froze all non-essential spending pending a complete financial audit. As the meeting concluded, Karen and her allies stormed out, but not before she turned to me with a glare. This is not over. You will be hearing from my attorney. My attorney simply handed her his card. We look forward to it. In the following days, the financial audit revealed even more concerning findings. Beyond the landscaping and consulting fees, we discovered that Karen and 2 other board members had used HOA funds to pay for personal expenses, including a weekend board retreat at a luxury resort that appeared to be solely a vacation for the board members and their spouses. Furthermore, the audit also revealed that the HOA's reserve fund, money set aside for major repairs and improvements, had been severely depleted for questionable expenses. This put the neighborhood at financial risk if any significant repairs were needed for common areas or facilities. Based on these findings, the interim board faced a decision: attempt to recover the misused funds from the former board members or focus on restructuring the HOA to prevent such abuses in the future. We decided to do both. With the help of my attorney, we sent demand letters to Karen and the other involved board members requesting repayment of misappropriated funds totaling nearly $37,000. We also provided them with a copy of the audit report and informed them that failure to repay would result in legal action and potential criminal charges for embezzlement. Simultaneously, we began working on revised bylaws that would provide greater transparency and homeowner oversight. Key changes included requiring all policy changes to be approved by 75% of property owners with 45 days notice. Number 2, implementing quarterly financial reviews by an independent accountant. 3, creating term limits for board members. Number 4, establishing a clear process for homeowners to dispute violations and fines. Number 5, requiring multiple competitive bids for any expense over $1,000. While these changes were being drafted, we held several community forums to gather input from homeowners. The turnout was impressive, with many residents expressing relief at the more open and collaborative approach. Karen and 2 other board members eventually agreed to repay the misused funds after their attorney reviewed our evidence. The other 2 board members claimed they were not aware of the financial improprieties and provided emails showing they had questioned some expenses but were overruled by Karen. We worked out separate agreements with them for partial repayments. As the 60-day period for a new board election approached, an unexpected development occurred. Several homeowners approached me with a proposal to dissolve the HOA entirely and replace it with a simpler neighborhood association focused only on maintaining common areas and organizing community events. "We've been talking with our neighbors," one longtime resident explained. "Most of us feel the HOA has become too restrictive and expensive. We would prefer a more limited organization with lower fees and fewer rules." This aligned with my own thinking. While HOAs can serve a valuable purpose in maintaining community standards and mafias, they often become vehicles for overregulation and petty power struggles. We conducted a community-wide survey to gauge interest in this option, and the results were clear. 78% of respondents preferred dissolving the HOA in favor of a simpler neighborhood association. Dissolving an HOA is not simple, though. It typically requires approval from 80 to 90% of homeowners and coordination with county authorities regarding common areas and facilities. However, with my ownership stake and the support of other residents, we had the votes needed to proceed. We held a final vote at the well-attended community meeting where the motion to dissolve the HOA and establish a neighborhood association passed with 87% approval. Karen and a few allies did not attend. The transition took about 6 months to complete, working with county officials and our attorney to ensure all legal requirements were met. The new neighborhood association has a simple charter: maintain the community pool and playground, organize 3 community events annually, and manage minimal landscaping of common areas. The monthly fees dropped from $200 to $75 per household, and most restrictive rules were eliminated. I still maintain a low profile about my extensive ownership, although it's no longer really a secret. I've been transparent about my intentions to maintain a pleasant, affordable community, and most residents seem appreciative of the changes. As for Karen, she put her house on the market 3 months after the HOA dissolution and moved away, reportedly to another neighborhood with so-called proper standards. The 2 board members most closely aligned with her financial improprieties also sold their homes within the year. The HOA neighborhood is a different place now. Children's bicycles sometimes sit in front yards overnight. Oh my god! Some houses have 3 cars in the driveway. Can you believe it? And a few residents have painted their front door colors that would have earned violations under the old regime. But property values have remained stable, and community participation in neighborhood events has actually tripled. Oh, and before I forget to mention, my classic Mustang restoration is nearly complete now. I still park it in my driveway alongside my daily driver and truck, and yes, nobody complains. And yeah guys, if you enjoyed the story, please do me the favor, whenever you see one of these AI channels getting recommended on the right side of my videos, please click on the 3 dots and click on Do Not Recommend Channel. You are doing the entirety of YouTube a favor. Let's not reward people that buy views, likes, and comments, and instead stand up for real creators. Thank you so much. But now let's continue with the last story of the video. And this story is of course from r/malicious compliance, and it is incredibly satisfying. This one is titled "Turn My Camera On? Fine." So in 2021, I was working on a project with this manager called Mark, who was a real stickler for the rules. He was the kind of dude who would not allow chit-chat in his team and loved an office day more than anything, despite the fact that our team was external and all of us lived crazy far away. I've got a chronic disease which at the time was kept relatively under control with infusions at the hospital every few weeks. Seeing as Mark did not want to chit-chat, he was not aware that I live with this disease. Well, one day, I was in the hospital working from the bed with a cannula, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, in one arm. We had our daily meeting planned, and I figured it would be fine to call in without my camera, as they could still hear me just fine. And I did not want to freak out anyone with the infusion line in the picture and whatnot. So I get onto the call, and Mark immediately comments that he cannot see my face. I tell him that I've not got my camera on today and don't elaborate, figuring it's a 15-minute call and I could just as easily be driving or something. Mark responds by asking me to stay back on the call after we finish. I of course comply with his demands. or you could say maliciously comply, and he chews me out for not turning on my camera, saying it is a rule and that we all need to show our faces. Fine, I can do that. I turn on my camera and watch his face go from red to white as he sees me in what is very clearly a hospital room. I tell him I'm uncomfortable being on camera while I am getting treatment, also not elaborating on what it is for. His sweaty little face still brings me joy to this day. Seriously, it was a really nice moment to bask in, and I think about it pretty often when I get managers who like rules just a little too much. And yeah guys, if you enjoy my content, please check out my playlist for endless stories, and I will see you again tomorrow.